because it's this kind of new thing, everyone thinks it's going to be a boom in collectability, and I just
But it's
don't
not.
think it's going to be.
No,
I really don't
no.
think it will. Happy new comic book day, geeks, and welcome to issue 28 of the Script Heroes podcast.
The show where we bring you comic news, book reviews, and industry blues. My name is Joseph Jasonowski, and I am the writer of Jenner Hero, Cunning Carly, and the Cryptoverse.
And I'm Katie Markham, scripter of the Rusty Robot Country Club and ghostwriter extraordinaire. Today we are talking about Void Rivals, number 9, Rook Exodus, number 2, and the first volume of Tony Daniel's Edenwood, which is issues 1 through 5. The trade just came out this week.
That's right. And if you enjoy any of those reviews or anything else in this episode, you can follow the pod on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all at the handle Script Heroes Pod. Or you can find my personal socials at JJAZ1111.
And I'm on all socials at Katie Markham Pro.
And now, on to the news. Okay, to start off the news this week, we have a little bit of, I guess, business news from DC Comics.
Industry news?
Kind of industry news. It's about comic shop promotions, essentially. So the article says they're bringing this back, an incentive program, which I've never heard of before, but apparently existed at some point. So for Absolute Power, for the event, for a lot of the first issues, they're going to be doing a deal for shops where they can get 25 copies for $25 as long as they order 25 copies of the matching book at full price. If that, let me go through the books because it'll make a little bit more sense.
50 copies, 25 of them are $1 each.
Kind of, because not 50 copies of the same book. So let me walk you through this. So if they were going to buy Absolute Power Ground Zero number 1 and they wanted to get 25 of those for $25, they would have to buy 25 copies at full price of Batman Superman World's Finest number 25. So each has a matching book.
Gotcha.
Absolute Power number 1, its matching book is Batman 146. Task Force 7 number 1, its matching book is World's Finest 25 as well. Absolute Power Origins number 1 is matched with World's Finest 27. Superman 16 is matched with Superman 14. It seems like the idea is just to make sure that the deal's going to stores that actually need these quantities. So they're going to stores that would already be buying quantities that high. So they're not going to a store that's we usually sell 5 to 10 copies and now we have 25.
No, that tracks.
That seems to be the idea.
It also seems like maybe they want to have DC stuff in stock for this Absolute Power event if they're hoping that that's going to bring people in to be like, let me pick up DC
because a lot
stuff.
of them are back. If you look at the Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, they're all back. So Superman 16 is matched with Superman 14. Wonder Woman 11 is matched with Wonder Woman 8. And Batman 151 is matched with Batman 146. So outside of Batman, which maybe that's because it's doing 2 monthly or they're doing something weird there. You're reading Batman, maybe the other two are at that 3-month gap, which is the order, the order gap of you order 3 months out. So for Wonder Woman and Superman, it would be, when they're getting Superman 14, they would then be ordering the Superman 16. Right. And they align.
No, I'm very jazzed about that.
Yeah, I thought it was a cool little thing to see. One, DC seems to have faith in Absolute Power if they're willing to give out 25 for 25.
I mean, come on, it's Mark Waid and Dan Mora. They better have faith.
It is. But yeah, that is, I think, very cool. And I think it means that there's going to be a ton of these Absolute Power books out there. So
yes.
That can go one of two ways, as you've told me from your experience at a bookshop that gets things secondhand. It's what do they call the latest relaunch?
Dawn of DC.
Frick. Dawn of DC. You said you've been getting in a ton of Dawn of DC
so
stuff.
many.
The high print. So we'll see if this ends up going that way or if it goes the other way of being a huge success.
We'll see. I mean, fingers crossed for a huge success.
But if you want to hop over major publishers here, over to Marvel, we have finally gotten something that I think we've done 2 news segments already on just the absolute speculation.
Oh my god, is it more X-Men books?
No. It is Grey Capullo, Return to Marvel.
Yes. Yeah, because we thought
So
he was coming back for Fantastic Four. He was just doing a cover
yes,
for them. And then we learned,
yes,
was it a Wolverine book that he was
yes, and they've
attached to?
officially announced this Wolverine book. Finally, it's called Wolverine Revenge, and he is teaming up with Jonathan Hickman on this
Ooh!
series. It's
Ultimate
going to be a
Spider-Man, we've been loving
5-issue.
that.
Yeah, it's going to be a 5-issue mini series that somehow involves dinosaurs. I don't really know, but there are multiple dinosaurs in the art.
Wolverine's gonna
So
fight the meteor. That's what he's getting revenge for.
evidently. But yeah, so it seems like the Wolverine kind of like little leak is turned out to be accurate. But yeah, we have details. Is there? I think there's a blurb here.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Wolverine Revenge will pit Wolverine against a cadre of foes that will turn his world upside down. He's been beaten, he's been bloodied, and Logan has only one thought on his mind: revenge. Oh, and this is the other thing. It will have a red band edition. Interestingly enough, with elevated violence.
I was actually literally this week, I was talking to my comic guy because Blood Hunt 2 had come out, and I was like, Keith, please, give me your thoughts. What have you noticed with the red band shit? One of the things that he said to me is that it seems like a lot of the people who are buying the red band books are the type of people who buy books and don't read them. Like, they're buying them as, like, collector items. And I'm like, that... It completely
I've seen some of the red band, like 1 in 25, like incentive covers and stuff, up on eBay for like hundreds of dollars.
Absurd. Like, it strikes me as the type of thing where, because it's this kind of new thing, everyone thinks it's going to be a boom in collectability, and I just don't think it's going to be.
No,
I really don't think it will. Like, people might try to pull that off now, but...
Yeah, I'm interested because, like, I would have thought that everybody who was buying it just to read would just buy the red band, because, like, why are you going to buy the edition with less stuff and less? Yeah, like, I don't know, man. I would just buy the red band if I was buying something there, and like, I don't know, the idea of Marvel, and maybe this is me being super out of touch and or being in my own bubble, but the idea of Marvel doing a red band edition of a comic, as in like, this is the adult version, makes me think they just don't know their market, because the vast majority of their readers are adults.
Right. Like, what Keith said, because I was like, why do you think they're doing this as well? I was like, why do you think they wouldn't just make, a rated M comic? And he is convinced that it's the Disney of it all, that they're literally not allowed to release something that
that tracks.
Is not also accessible to like,
especially with a mini
most
like
average consumer.
Yeah. Like, I kind of get it for the event if they were like, everybody needs to access our big event because it's our big event. Like, this is a 5-issue limited Wolverine book with top name creators on it. Like, you would assume they just slap an M rating on that and be like, we're going to do a dark Wolverine book. It's not like
Wolverine himself hasn't been incredibly violent in the past. Like,
no, it's not like literally probably coming out at the same time is going to be a rated R Wolverine movie. I think the idea that it's the Disney of it all makes a lot of sense, because I couldn't see a world in which Wolverine Revenge was published by not just DC, but any other publisher, and it wasn't an M-rated comic.
Yes. Like one of the big scenes from, it's either Blood Hunt 1 or 2, because Keith and I were being goobers and just flipping through to look at every single different page.
You told me a little bit about 1, so I'll try to remember if this is what I saw from 1 or if it's something I haven't seen.
For 1, I know that the big one was Doctor Strange being bisected and his guts coming out.
Yes.
For issue 2, we were looking through, and one of them was like eyeball gore of like an eyeball falling out of someone's face because of gore. Which, that's what I was about to say. Edenwood, which we're talking about this week, is buried in my pile of pulls here. I don't...
Yeah.
Do you remember, did that have, like, a mature readers only warning on it or anything? Like, I feel like eyeball gore is kind of common.
It's like, weird. That's been a Marvel thing, because I think it was Todd McFarlane who talked about one of his big issues before he left Marvel is like they wouldn't let him stab somebody in the eye, and he was like talking about like being like, I can stab it through the chest, yeah, I can stab it through the neck, I can stab it through their throat, yes, all good. I can't stab it through their eye, no, not allowed. It's like, what? So maybe Marvel still has policies in place that are like eyeballs are.
This is full spitballing.
Yeah.
Because if a child is reading a comic, I suppose they probably don't have, like, if they have a pencil or something and they're pretending to stab their friend in the way that they saw a comic book person die.
Oh, no,
like,
that's so stupid.
They're not going to be able to like, an eyeball is a very sensitive part of the body, and if they're like, we have to protect the children, it could be a like monkey see, Katie, monkey do.
That's actually like I still think it's dumb reasoning, but I think you might have locked onto the dumb reasoning that actually was the train of thought. Pure speculation, but I like your train of speculation here.
Thank you. Yes, I do too. Yeah, super wacky. There was also like one of the pages that is like the extra pages, because they're not only gorier, they also have these extra pages in them, was like just a big shot of a vampire saying just nothing, because it's obviously not plot important, because it's not in the regular version of the book. Keith said it was some sort of reveal about a vampire, and I'm like, so is that just not in the other book? Because that whole page was not in the other book. And then another one was, it seems to be a lot of like close up on death is in the Red Band one. Like there was one where some like people were getting eaten by vampires, and then in the non-Red Band version, it like,
are the vampires just zombies in this Marvel event? Because it kind of feels like they're just trying to do Marvel zombies, but with vampires. yeah, with Blade.
Yeah, no, it's very odd. I don't understand it, and I don't understand it even more on a fucking Wolverine book.
Yeah. In any case, Greg Capullo on Wolverine does sound pretty freaking metal.
And Greg Capullo drawing like dinosaurs and other strange creatures.
Yeah.
Here for it.
I'm super here for it.
But are we ready to talk about our polls for the week?
Let's do it! And we're back with another week of polls for you guys. This week we have Rook Exodus, number 2. We have Void Rivals, number 9. And I don't have my Edenwood issues here because just too many issues to keep track of with all the shit that I have. But we have Edenwood, issues 1 through 5, aka Volume 1. Neither one of us actually got the TPB, but the TPB came out this week, and we used that as an excuse to read the first 5.
Yes.
But of course, that's not all we picked up. What else you got, Katie?
So for this week...
Why was there such a hesitancy there?
Because I put all of my books together like a fool. So we've got Man's Best, number 3, as well as D-Prog, number 3. And then after months of not going, I went to my home comic shop where I have Nightwing, Green Arrow, and Batman Superman World's Finest pulled.
Holy crap.
And have just absolute chonker.
I need to ask you a question. Have you read any of Man's Best yet?
Yes.
Because I saw a post about it today. And the artist works on a 60-panel grid.
It's so good.
I saw some pages and I was like, I am blown away. I might have to read this.
Because it sure seems like Joseph doesn't pay attention to my Twitter feed. Just kidding, mostly. It was in the dead of night one night when I tweeted about Man's Best. No, it's super cute. It's super great. It does work on this really wonderful paneling system. What?
You didn't pay attention to my Twitter feed either.
Tom Waltz, the Knicks. Weird ticket giveaways.
I tweeted about a comic yesterday. Yesterday. I tweeted about a comic yesterday, and I bet you can't tell me what comic it was.
I sure fucking can. It was
exactly
Exo Manowar.
No.
Damn it. I did not know that.
Not a bad shot in the dark, though, because the new Exo Manowar series came out last week.
I was aware of that.
Yet, though. Yeah.
What did you tweet about?
I'll grab it. I picked it up this week, despite it being a few weeks old. I tweeted about RoboForce #1
Ooh.
because my friend Elton Tomasi did some art in it. So
yeah.
I picked up a copy, and it is actually really freaking good. I just like robots, though. Like, between Transformers, Petrolhead, RoboForce, robots are fun. But in addition to that, in terms of comics that actually came out this week, I got Ninja Turtles Saturday Morning Adventures #13, which is the crossover between all the cartoon editions, which is really, really cool and exciting. Cobra Commander number 5. Still haven't read any of these, but I will catch up at some point.
He says, like a liar.
Yeah. No, I will. It's the Energon universe. I think I actually will. Rebel Moon, House of the Blood Axe, #4. Green Lantern, Alan Scott, #6. Local Man, #10. Conan the Barbarian, #11. And Green Lantern War Journal, #9.
That's nice, a pretty cover. Right? It's like a galaxy with a face. Pretty bad.
I picked this one up because instead of the normal cover, here's like the normal cover. But I really liked this cover. So
that's a rad cover,
right? But yeah, I had a pretty stacked week this week, honestly.
Yeah.
But in any case, do you have feelings about the reading order?
I mean, I feel like we should do Edenwood last since it's a full volume.
I'm gonna disagree. I think
you want to do it first.
I want to sandwich it. I want.
You want to sandwich it?
I want to sandwich it.
That feels deranged. I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if I'm comfortable with that.
I want to sandwich it. I want to do Void Rivals, Edenwood, and I want to finish talking about Rook Exodus.
Okay, I am fine with that. But I want you to know,
if it upsets you that much, I would be okay with pulling
my "Where's my alimony, Stephen" attitude. It's horrible, and I hate it, but I will accept it.
I'm sorry. That was
so we shall go to Void Rivals.
Let's do it. Void Rivals #9. As Darik and Salila cling to life deep in the wasteland, they find Springer. It's the first Energon universe appearance of everyone's favorite triple charger Autobot. The writer is, of course, Robert Kirkman, Invincible, The Walking Dead, and Oblivion Song. The artist is Lorenzo De Felici of Oblivion Song and Chroma. The colorist is Patricio Del Pecci, and the letterer is Russ Wooten. Katie, we disagreed, I think, pretty heavily about the last issue. You felt like not enough happened. We were kind of slow moving, and it was a fast issue in terms of reading time. I would argue this is a pretty different issue, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one.
No, it's one of those things where looking at the previous issue in the sandwich of all of the issues, it's like, okay, that's pretty rad. As like an individual issue, I had my problems with it. But as we get to this one, I'm like, okay, it was pretty rad to have like that full issue chase fight. I still stand by everything that I said.
That's fair. I think. That's fair. I figured this is. I thought as I was reading this issue, I was like, this feels like somehow in the time between the universe heard what Katie was upset about in issue 8, and it was just like, you want shit to happen? Here we go.
Shit's gonna happen, brother.
Shit
so first of all,
fan.
I really like the way that Robert Kirkman writes the humor in this book. Like, a lot of it is very kind of one-offy in not distracting ways. Even the opening thing. So we talked about the God Tier issue ender last month, which is where Salila was ran through with a spear and just like dead and proffered on it. And the first line being her like kind of weakly going like, I'm alive, and then immediately Darik like going into panic mode with like, okay, what do I do? It was very well done. I love their dynamic so much. I think that they are such fun characters together. The art team on this book.
I told you, I feel personally offended that Lorenzo De Felici was not nominated for an Eisner because, God,
it's so good. It's so phenomenal, and it has been so phenomenal throughout the entire thing. It's so great. There's a really, really fucking rad fight scene at the very end. Super fucking cool.
the use of like the size differences in that fight scene.
Mm-hmm. And
Such
just
use.
the use of color in this sci-fi story is so
Oh,
good.
yeah.
Like, one thing that I
Let
love
me try to find a good
dearly
example of this.
is like older X-Men covers that are just splashes of pink everywhere.
And just a change.
Right, there's a really wonderful tone change when we cut back to the Pigman type
Yes,
guy.
I love the Pigman. I don't know who he is, but I love him. I think he
He's
means
certainly
something
someone.
to Transformer fans.
He does. I remember we went over this when we did our bonus episode on Void Rivals, Volume 1.
It's always what makes me sad about Void Rivals. I'm like, I love this so much, but there's always those little things. I'm like, if I was a Transformers fan, I'm sure I would love it so much more. And I just feel like out of the joke sometimes.
And that's actually gonna lead into my one kind of vibe harsh on this book. I like it so much as a standalone story that it's a bummer to me whenever like the Transformers or these other like kind of Energon characters are brought into it. Like, I understand why. I get that whatever's happening in Void Rivals is tied into like Transformers lore, and that was like part of the conceit of the Energon universe was Robert Kirkman essentially being like, my toys are now going in the Transformers box, and they belong there. And like, power to him, absolutely. But it's one of those things where just like, I understand that this is probably rad for Robert Kirkman and Transformers fans and whatever, but it's my least favorite part of these books when they have Transformers stuff happen.
Yeah, I both agree on this because like here, let me see if I can word this correctly. Because I agree with you in the sense of like when Transformers, it's not when Transformers stuff or Transformers characters, because like I've enjoyed the Pigman's presence in this book.
That's fair.
It's when Transformers lore comes into it, if that makes sense. Like the issue ender. I was like, this is cool, but I feel like it means so much more to Transformers fans because I feel like I'm supposed to know something here. Or anytime that council shows up, I'm like, I don't feel like I'm getting this the way I'm supposed to. But like when Springer showed up in this issue, I thought that was rad. I thought the use of Springer in this issue was rad. I thought that, you know, if it was because I didn't feel like I needed to know about his Transformers background. Like I felt like the idea of like, there's a large robot here who's like helps them. And, you know, he gets really easily pissed off by, like, this little annoying to him, like, essentially like a bee to him, but it's a real character to us. Like, I thought that was a cool concept of, like, kind of like, like a peaceful giant who's just, like, trying to mind his own business, and our characters kind of involve him in this. I thought that was cool. I didn't think we needed Transformers knowledge, so I really like that. I thought it'd give us a great action scene. I thought it was a good kind of endpoint for the issue, but then the things like the council and the cliffhanger are where I go like, now you're kind of pulling on, and it's not that it's necessary, but you're making me feel a little bit like I'm supposed to know something that I don't know. And that's where it gets a little bit too far for me. But that being said, God, I love this issue. Like, you nailed it in that the dynamic is just so good at this point between Solila and Derek. Derek in this issue was just fantastically written.
Good.
Like, his mental state throughout this issue of like he's joking and he's trying to find, and he's like the one who always wants to go on, but you can kind of see him cracking. And like unsure and getting more and more stressed out, and the way that the hand droid plays into that, and then the dynamic of the hand droid, Derek and Springer all interacting is great. So yeah, and then you add on just some of the best art in comics right now. It's just like, this is a real good issue.
I feel really hyped on Void Rivals for sure. And honestly, retroactively, the funny thing is, like, I feel like the previous issue.
The weird thing is, like, retroactively, this issue both made me go like, I get the last issue, but also like, I kind of get your criticisms of the last issue more now, because this like reminded me just how good this series can get. And so I was like, I kind of get why last issue had you a little. Maybe I maybe have too much faith in Robert Kirkman that I'm like, if it's slow for a reason, and I'm okay with that. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this. It's been a great series, 9 issues through. Like, if the biggest downtick is like last issue being a bit slow, that's a good series.
Yes.
I feel.
I
You
still
want to
think
stop a rating
Volume
on it?
1 has been better than Volume 2, though.
Yes, I agree. I agree. But we're only halfway through this volume, and I feel
Fair
like
enough.
the back half of the first volume was where the really awesome stuff of like when he was being tortured, and that was like our favorite scene.
Yes.
Like there's still room for this.
I'm
arc
very, very
too.
hyped to for this series to continue. I do have a numbered rating. I theoretically, did I write it down? No.
No.
I am going to give this issue a 7.5 out of 10. Again, I feel like it was a really, really strong issue, but the Energon universe coming in kind of distracted me a bit.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm not going to be too far off of you there. I went half step above you. I went with an 8 out of 10 for this issue. I'm enjoying this stuff.
Absolutely.
And I feel like this is not the jump on point. I feel like last week is the better jump on point if you wanna jump on there. Because that gives you the build to this.
We've talked about this with Robert Kirkman before.
Yeah, he's not a great jump onable writer.
No, we've said that 1,000 times. Start with Volume 1.
Yeah.
Because Volume 1 is also just really fucking good.
Yeah, and he's like the consistency across Kirkman series is like there's a lot of differences. The consistency is it's really easy to read through. Like it's really easy to start at one and just you'll be caught up quickly because it's like some of the most bingeable
very
comics.
Bingeable.
Yeah. Like he is one of the few comic book creators who I'm like he has created like the bingeable in comic book medium because I don't think the comic book medium is like inherently bingeable.
I don't think it's supposed to be as a serialized medium.
Like I don't as I like been rereading the IDW TMNT books like I do maybe a volume of that at most a day, which is like 10 to 14 issues. Kirkman series, and I love that. I think it's fantastic. But like Kirkman series, I could read, like 48 issues in a day, which is a huge difference.
It is wild, yeah.
I digress.
Are we ready to talk about Edenwood?
I am.
Let's do it! Edenwood, Volume 1. Teenager Ryan Astor gets lost looking for his girlfriend in a magical land called Edenwood, a multi-dimensional realm where an eons-long war between witches and demons has staged its final battle. Ryan becomes a legendary demon hunter and finds himself thrust into the role of the hero who will ultimately lead a team of demon killers to save humanity from the demon kings. Swords and sorcery meet horror and sci-fi warfare in an epic tale of human spirit and survival that's not to be missed. The writer-artist here is Tony S. Daniel of Batman, Detective Comics, Deathstroke, and, as Jay and I deeply, deeply love, Noctera. The colorists here are Leonardo Pacchiarotti and J. David Ramos, and the letterer is Nathan Kempf. Jay, we read issues 1 through 5.
We did.
Theoretically, we pretended that we read them as bound up volume, but we just had each been individually collecting it, essentially.
Yep.
How'd you feel?
I have mixed feelings.
That long pause is never a good sign from either one of us.
I have mixed feelings because I love Tony S. Daniel's art, and I love it here so much. The character designs, the main character design is just so good. The world building is fantastic. I love the concept. The first page, I think, is a really damn good first page. I made specific note of that when I was reading, because like all these characters were introduced, the world was introduced, dynamics were introduced, and it all came across on that first page. And I was like, that's really, really good. The more and the deeper I got, I think even after issue 1, I was really on board because it started introducing questions and mysteries, and we started time jumping, and I was like, oh, we're doing parallel storytelling. One of my favorite things in the world is having a flashback timeline and a modern timeline and running them simultaneously so we see how we get there. I don't think this book juggled it well. Because none of the questions really ever feel answered. We don't really like continue straight in either of the timelines. Like we're jumping around in the two timelines. As we're jumping between them, it's hard not to get lost. More characters are introduced constantly, and then they're pivoted and changed, and I can't track character arcs, I can't track growth, I can't track what the main story really is. Like, there's good threads in it, but it feels like something is introduced and then paid off like 2 pages later, and then something that was introduced like 5 issues ago isn't paid off. So it's just a hard story to track. And the thing that really came across to me where I was like, this isn't landing with me the way that it should, is when a few big moments, and I don't know how like spoilery we want to go here. The series has been out for a while in theory. But there was a character's death that I thought should have been more impactful than it was.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was like a reveal at the issue for Ender that I was like, didn't really land. And when those two moments kind of back to back, because I think they were both in issue 4, like back to back happened, and I was like, I'm not feeling the way that I think I should be feeling. I was kind of like, I'm not sure that the build is there for each of the moments. That's my
No, that's so fair. I also did not come away feeling particularly satisfied with this book. I think one of the big failings of it for me was how much just writing there is in it.
Oh yeah.
Like we have talked about with a number of writer artists, how they're able to, because they are in charge of both the writing and the art, how they're able to really make the art replace the writing in a lot of places where maybe a writer would feel the need to say something. Tony S. Daniel does not seem particularly
I've always told you they're
that.
the extremes. For every writer artist who puts no text on the page, there's the writer artist that covers them. They
and
are
these
the extremes.
Are covered in
they
text.
Live extremes.
It's covered in text, and a lot of the text is just so expository and layerless is the word I want to go with there. Like, I feel like everyone tells you how they're feeling, or they tell you what they've been through. And it never feels like the writing is supposed to have, like, nuance to it. It all just feels so on the page. And I think that's just a huge downfall, especially because conceptually, I think this book has a lot going on. Like,
I agree.
And having someone word vomit a lot of what's happening at you is not great for digesting that. I think that it became really kind of messy and muddled as it went on.
Yeah.
Like the time, obviously we're moving around in time, but we never get a sense of really how or when that's happening. So like you suddenly are back in a flashback and they're not in France anymore, but instead they are in a farmhouse, and there's just really not, like, there's no visual language for the movement through time. And I think one of
there's like the little time stamps, and it'll be like 3 years ago, and then you'll get your location stamp, or you'll just get a location stamp, and that means it's the present.
Exactly. And I think that in the first issue, they did a good job of kind of showing everyone move throughout in time, because the whole friend group gets separated in these woods.
Yeah.
And there are like these billowing clouds that come through, and everyone kind of moves into those. I feel like because we are never moving through time, really, like we're not typically journeying through Edenwood, which is theoretically how these different timelines happen. We're just kind of dropped into these scenes, so it can be very disorienting. Like you said, it's hard to tell where in someone's character arc you are. Like, we get it a little bit with Ryan as he, like, tells us how many demons he's killed.
Is that how you pronounce that?
How are you pronouncing it?
Leon.
I don't know. I was pronouncing it Ryan.
I assumed Ryan would have been spelt Ryan. You know?
They also... Okay, real quick, as we're talking about names, the girlfriend's name... Do you remember what it is?
It changes.
It changed.
He changes it.
Yeah. He calls her Abigail at some point.
Yeah, he calls her Abigail later. Yeah, that was a rough mess up. I noted that.
I think it was literally just a typo or a, like, remnant of a past script or something. I'm like, you can't be doing that.
Yeah.
I'm also very confused.
Yeah. Like, I think the biggest kind of example of, like, not really knowing where we're supposed to be in character, or, like, and that's it. It's kind of, we just jump to, like, where they are in their character arc without actually like seeing the arc. And I think the biggest example is something that I wanted to love and be invested in this book, because I think it's set up really well initially, and that's Rion and Elias's relationship.
Yes.
And it's set up, I think, really well in issue 1, and then we just start jumping around and like, oh man, they're enemies, and then oh wait, now they're blood brothers, and I'm like, we saw
How did this
nothing
happen?
of the two of you like becoming friends or working together or anything. We just jumped there, and now there's a new crew, and now the new crew's dead, except the new crew isn't dead, and then we're moving forward, and then it's punctuated by, and no spoilers, the end of the book where they just throw like 8 new characters at you, and they're like, they're here for the next arc, and I'm like, can you stop?
That was absurd.
In this book.
That was actually absurd. Like the last
can you
2
track
pages.
every character that was in the book, or every important character in this book? Because I can't.
No.
New villains were introduced, new like supporting witches were introduced. Like there's just constantly new characters, and I was like, I can't track this.
It feels like really this book wants so badly to have a bunch of spin-off series. Like my case for that is that theoretically, throughout the course of the book, Ryan killed the like 3
There's no way it's Ryan.
Witch King. His friend's name is Elias. He seems to be from Normal World.
Yeah, but you don't spell Ryan Rion.
His parents disappeared in a woods. I will call him Rion just for you. But
there's no way it's Ryan. I'm gonna ask Tony S. Daniel at a convention. I'll go up and just be like,
I would bet that he's done interviews about the book and has pronounced it. But immaterial. Shit, what was I saying?
I was making a joke because me and Katie have a thing where I'm supposed to ask him something about Noctera that we disagreed with, and I can't remember what it is anymore. But
I didn't even remember that there was
some disagreement we had on Noctera where I was like, I will ask Tony S. Daniel. So I was trying to riff on that, but I don't think Katie picked up on it.
No, not even a little bit. But
I think it's in our like episode 1 or whatever. So or
episode 0 actually.
If you go back there, so.
Fuck. I forget what I was saying.
Sorry, I'm sorry. That's completely on me.
No, that's all right.
Ryan, you're talking about spin-off series.
Yes.
Yeah.
Theoretically, throughout the course of this, Rion has killed like 3 Witch Kings or something? Or
yeah,
Demon
the 3.
Kings?
They were built up to be so big and we never actually see them. Like the whole
and we know that they have
killing them.
Yeah. We know that they have this book of Rion's mentors that Rion now has. Like 3 years later, he has it.
That's like the big thing.
So he has defeated these 3
yeah,
Demon
him and
Kings.
his mentor
Demon
defeated
Kings?
them right before his I think they were they Demon Kings or were they just I think the Demon Kings are like the main demons. I think these were just like
oh yeah, these were like the 3 lake demons or something.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be this super big deal. This is what they're doing. And we see basically none of it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it feels like
they
that.
keep jumping over important stuff.
Yeah.
Just being like, this is the outcome.
And like, again, so much of it looks cool. I think
looks
that
amazing.
A lot of it gets a bit muddled sometimes, though. Like, I think that the book ultimately struggles with an aesthetic, honestly. Like, the melding of the witches aesthetic, the demons aesthetic, and then the, like, modern U.S. military aesthetic kind of fractures. And I think that they don't do a good job of blending them where it should be blended, and really making them feel separate where they should feel separate.
No, that's fair.
Like, it all looks cool. It just doesn't feel like it's so hard not to compare it to Noctera, because,
yes. Greatest.
Like, looking at Noctera, everything feels so cohesive. It feels like a living, breathing world. And then we come over to Edenwood, and even though it is like a wholly original world, it doesn't feel like it has a whole lot. I threw this around with something recently. It doesn't feel like it has a whole lot of identity to it.
It feels to me like one of those people who like write out like 100 pages of lore and like this is how everything in this world works, and then just kind of like goes through it without feeling the need to explain everything to the reader or like actually touch on everything. It's like, okay, well, my story's going to go here, 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 and here. And then this makes sense because 2 years ago, this guy killed the Demon King, and that was a big deal in the universe. And it's like, well, it's not a big deal to the reader because they didn't see that. But it feels like it feels almost like like I just gave you it, but it also feels like a story like in an existing universe that's touching on like, these are the things that happen between all these things that everybody knows because it was part of the main series.
Yeah.
But this is the main series, so yeah. It's very muddled. I think that was a good, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think particularly the roughest part for me, and I think you and I are both big like character people.
Yeah.
It's so rough to feel anything for these characters besides, damn, they look cool. Because I feel like they don't get a lot of personality. We almost get it with Lexington, who I was ready for me to be like, she's my favorite. All of the personality
comes in the first 2 pages.
Exactly.
And then it's gone.
And then it's gone.
That's why I was like, the first page is full of personality. And I was like, oh, that's cool. Gone.
And it's gone. But it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous.
Tony S. Daniels is a
damn good artist.
He's a damn good artist. Are you prepared to throw a numbered rating on Edenwood Volume 1?
I'm going first. I am going first.
Yes.
Yeah. It's tough. It's tough. I really wanted to love it. I really was into it in the beginning, and then it just kind of slowly lost me more and more. And like the thing is, compared to individual issues, I feel like I'm always harsher on like the trade because like the volume. It's like now I see all the pieces put together. I know the totality of it. But it looks damn good. It's cool. It's a cool world, even if it's not a fully like fleshed out world, I guess. But there's no character arcs. It's hard to follow any of the characters. I'm gonna land on a 5.5 out of 10 for this book.
I'm gonna fully twin you on that. 5.5, and not a pull list rec.
No, I wouldn't recommend this series. I recommend Noctera instead.
Absolutely recommend Noctera. Read Noctera. And if you want to hear like a full hour of our unabridged thoughts about Noctera, check out issue 0.
Yeah.
We talked about
no video on that though, unfortunately. But you can listen to us.
You'll just have to listen to our dulcet tones.
Yeah.
But in any case, are we ready to go talk about Rook Exodus?
Let's do it! Rook Exodus number 2. That's a better cover. In the far future, the man known only as Rook wants out. He reckons anywhere is better than the crumbling planet Exodus, where all of nature, especially its imported animal population, has grown out of control as the world's engine has utterly failed. Scavenging for an escape vessel, he's interrupted by the power-hungry bear master named Ursaw, who won't stop until he rules all of what remains of Exodus. Also, who is the mysterious direwolf? And is she Rook's ally or enemy? Can we just talk about them throwing an also in this summary?
Right?
So funny.
I also like that she is the also, even though she's the start of the issue. I love her.
Let me do my credits, and then
you're right. And then I'll
the writer is of course Jeff Johns, Green Lantern, Flash, Justice League. The artist is Jason Fabok, Batman, Justice League, Suicide Squad, all-star creative team. The colorist is Brad Anderson, and the letterer is Rob Lay. Katie, we both loved issue 1.
Yeah.
We both loved the preview in the Ghost Machine book. Does issue 2 live up to this hype that we've been riding on?
I will say, issue 1 I think was astounding. This very good. I don't think it's as good as issue 1. But issue 1 I went so nutso for. So like
Interesting.
That's totally fair. It does not harshen my enjoyment of this at all. I like it so much. I like Direwolf so much. I was waiting for her to come in. She is so cool. I do think that I'm gonna call her out. She's a basic bitch, naming her wolf Freya. Like, okay, girl, I love it. But she is so rad. And I also Rook's, like, grief processing in the first 4 or 5 pages or whatever it is.
Made me retroactively sad about Swine. Like, I genuinely was, like, retroactively so sad about Swine.
I'm legitimately heartbroken that we don't get more Swine content.
Oh, like, I wanted Swine. Swine was my favorite. Swine was awesome.
Swine was so good. And based off of the way that Direwolf responded to his death and Rook responded to his death and what we saw of him in the Ghost Machine preview, give me a prequel that is just Swine. Because I love that boy.
A prequel that's basically what we saw in the Ghost Machine book.
Right?
Like the two of them just like going around through the
But yeah, I think that this issue did a very good job of being incredibly action-packed while still feeling like it was moving so much plot forward. Like, the action did not feel gratuitous at all. It all felt very, like, pointed and purposeful. And I think that was really well done for, like, quickly moving through plot and introducing who is now going to be, like, our other lead character, I would hope. There she is. Oh my gosh. And to touch on again, to go full broken record, the character designs are so phenomenal. They're so, like,
good.
Talking about identity again, it creates such a strong identity for the book, for the universe, and it all spirals out from those helmets into the different aesthetics that we see. I'm super psyched that we've met our big bad more officially, and I am very afraid of him, frankly, and I'm so excited about what's to come. How did you feel?
I love this. I really, really love this. Like, this might take over as my new favorite series going right now.
Ooh.
I think I said it after issue 1, where it's like, I thought Jeff Johns had forgotten how to write, which sounds so harsh, like from this DC stuff. But now I'm just convinced that he had started phoning it in for DC, because like this is back to like, oh, this is why Green Lantern's like my favorite character ever, because of the stuff that Jeff Johns did with that. And it's like, this feels like that, where it's like in 2 issues, I care so much about the character, and this is why like I no longer buy the shit of like, well, it's because we only had 1 issue, or we only had 2, or it's because it's a mini series, or this or that, and that's why you don't care about. It's like, no, I care that Swine is dead so much, and he died in issue 1, and it's issue 2. I feel stakes. I am actually scared for the characters. I am actually like invested in every moment, in everything of him like going out to investigate this wreck, and then this giant monster popping up and him swinging out.
Oh,
I'm invested in the plane if he can get, or not the plane, the spaceship, if he can actually get off, in him and Dire Wolf's past and like what is going on there. And all. Like, I care about literally everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that is such a testament to how well it's written, how well the dialogue is written, how good everything looks, and how well the art is conveying the story.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the pacing is phenomenal.
Yes.
Like, you talked about being action packed. It kind of both is and isn't, because there's so much like stillness, and there's so much of like him just breathing and barely moving, and then action comes. Like, it just it knows when like you're gonna start getting bored with like it being a little slow, and then it gives you something, and then it kind of drags out. It's just masterful. I feel like really in every way. I am in love with this series already.
It's incredibly good, and just as kind of like coming off of Edenwood looking at this, I feel like one of the big differences is what is not included in here. Like, it doesn't feel like anything is chaff. It doesn't feel like anything is like cuttable stuff. It all makes you feel things for the character or learn about the world, and most of the time those things are happening in harmony with each other. So we're learning about the world as we learn about the characters, and as we learn about who they are and their relationships, and it's all woven together so stupidly well. But would you call issue number 2 a pull list wreck?
I'm gonna say yes. I think you can really get in here. Honestly, good job of being an accessible issue too. Like, like Swine's death, happening in issue 1 is really important. But honestly, the opening here kind of works really well, and you're actually going to be a little bit. They actually have a little blurb of what happened in the last issue, but I think even if you don't read that, it's nice to have it there. But even if you don't read that, I think you'll still have all the pieces. I think it does a good job of kind of introducing it through Dire Wolf, so it's not repetitive for the issue 1 people, but for anybody jumping in issue 2, it's still there. So I would call it a pull list wreck. I think I would really too. Well.
And what numbered rating would you give it?
I give this a 9 out of 10. Like, I think this series is so ridiculously good.
I support that. I feel like you set me up for failure by asking how it lived up to issue 1, because I loved issue 1 so much. I still gave this an 8.5 out of 10. Like, it's still an incredibly good issue.
You hated this issue. You hated this issue. No, I think I gave issue 1 a 9.5. So I went a little lower too. But
but yeah, super, super good. And yeah, it is an accessible issue too. If you can, I would read issue 1 first, just because it's also an incredibly good issue. But yeah, if you're going to your comic book shop and you want to jump into this, and by all means, issue 2, do it.
Do it.
But that is going to take us to the end of our polls for the week.
It will.
Are you ready
Do you want
for
to?
the Creator Corner?
The
Here we are in the Creator Corner, where we sit back, relax, talk about writing comics, talk about the industry, talk about our strategies for writing rad stories. What we are going to talk about today is, we'll call it the anatomy of a villain. Jay, how do you make a villain who is scary, who has a strong sense of identity,
Ooh.
who fits the tone of your book? What are the
Oh,
components that you
I
think are
I
important
like
for
this
giving,
question.
right? And I do want to immediately curveball with,
Okay.
we're going to talk about more than just super villain, because there are villains
Okay.
of all
Okay.
sorts of skins.
I wish you had told me about the topic ahead. I would have worn my T-shirt that has the hooded figure on it, which is a villain that I created, and I would have felt like I could have just gestured. Um, Writing a villain's actually quite difficult.
Because it's very important.
Yeah, for my first creative book, I was like, how do I do a villain? We'll just make it Satan because like everybody's gonna know that the devil is a villain. No, but yeah. Do you want to get more like? Do you want just my general thoughts, or do you want to get into specific questions like about it, or do you
Do
want me
you
to start
think
with
that
like a
you
high
have
level?
general
I can start with a
thoughts?
high level. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's start with Mr. General Thoughts himself.
Yeah. So I think the first thing to, I guess you said not just super villain, but we're not talking like antagonist. We're talking about a villain.
I
Or
think that you can go as broad or narrow as you like.
okay. Yeah, so the first thing is to think about relation to your main character.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean like as a character, it doesn't have to be, though I think more and more are like directly tied to your main character. Like they don't have to have a necessarily direct feud. You can have it where their goals, where their, drives intersect in a way in which they cannot both achieve their goals. And that is kind of your propelling force. You need to figure out how they are the villain to your protagonist, essentially. And then, and this is the important thing, you have to figure out how you're going to get your audience to fear, hate, root against, whatever you want to use term for it. They need to come across as an antagonist to your reader, to your, yeah, we're talking about comic books, so I'll say to your reader. I was gonna say like I was gonna go across all mediums like reader view, but no, to your reader. So those are kind of the key things when building it up, I think, is how are they a villain to my main character? Because if you don't think about that early and you're like crafting a villain, you're like, he's this evil person who does this, and then somehow I need to put him in front of the main character, they won't maybe mesh as well as if you go like, okay, how do I create a villain that is going to be in the protagonist's way?
Yeah.
Or, the protagonist, probably more accurately, actually, the protagonist is going to be in the villain's way to achieving their goals. And so you're going to have to deal with that. So there's my high level pitch. And then give them a cool or a catchy name. That's important.
Says you, novice of names.
I think I have some good villain names.
He comes up with them eventually. It just takes a while.
I have some good villain names.
It just takes a while.
Leave me alone.
I'd like to point out that the villain you referred to at the start of this segment.
Yeah.
What's their name?
The hooded figure. People loved the hooded figure.
I love the hooded figure. I'm just saying,
That's a good name. That's a good name. Leave me alone. Listen, that wasn't like a name because like because the idea of it made sense in context, because it was the name. It had to be a name assigned because they weren't like a villain that would show up and be like, I am this. So it's like, what would you say to somebody who shows up in a hood and it's like, they did stuff? It's like the hooded figure. It makes sense. Leave me alone.
I'm sorry, I just had to immediately get you for that one. No, general thoughts. I think that you're right that people have really come to make that, connection. And obviously, it's kind of always been a thing. I mean, Darth Vader is Luke's father. Oh, wow. Suddenly you've got that deep personal connection. But
it works.
And it just works so well because then you get those character dynamics bouncing off each other. And it really helps to motivate your character to get in
Yeah.
their way, obviously. But yeah, like you're saying, it's not necessary that they
No.
have that like long-standing connection. I think that it's better when they have, even if it's a later developed or something connection, for sure. Um, but in terms of like general thoughts on villains, I feel like it's important not to give too much of them at first. Like,
Mm.
and I know that's probably a little backwards considering I just referenced Darth Vader, who like one of the first thing we see is him blowing up a planet. Um,
He doesn't blow up the planet.
it's been established on this podcast that I am far from a Star Wars expert. Doesn't he blow up Alderaan?
I mean, kind of, not really directly. It's
I
like
guess
the,
is it like the general man?
admiral guy. Yeah. I mean, I
Admiral
think he does.
Akbar. He's the only admiral I know from Star Wars.
He does give the order, but like, yeah, I think Star Wars is still a good indication of what you're saying because you don't get a ton of Vader in the first film. Like, he doesn't fight Luke in the first film.
Exactly, you know? And what I was thinking for him specifically, like we obviously blowing up a planet is bad, but like we didn't know anyone on Alderaan really, so how bad is it? I feel like one of the really
you want to get
effective...
into like what's forgivable for a villain and what's not in
oh
fiction?
God, I hope
it's
not.
all about who you care about as a reader, not about how bad what they do are.
Exactly. But I feel like one of the first really menacing moments of Vader we get is when he's like interrogating some admiral dude and he like force chokes him in the brig or in the bridge or whatever.
Yeah, that's like that's in his introduction.
I think so, yeah. And again, I've seen at the very least the first one.
Evidently. That is fully good job.
Thank you. And the fact that that has stuck with me, and like when I think about writing villains, it's like, okay, like Darth Vader, he's incredibly menacing immediately because we get a sense of his power, we get a sense of his, I feel like a big thing is a sense of how dangerous they are based on the way that other people treat them. And to kind of pivot to another movie, because movies are so fun for villains.
Also, just easier for listeners to rather than having to read a specific comic book to have seen
that is so fair.
Movie. Yeah,
like to pivot to a different type of villain. Regina fucking George. I think we've had arguments about whether Mean Girls is like high art or not before. I will stand by it. I love Mean Girls. I think Regina George.
We did have a conversation about Mean Girls once in the past.
I don't remember what the conversation specifically was, but I will die on the hill that Regina George is a great cinema villain. And I mean, one of the first things we learn about her is the power she holds over everyone around her, and using the world to show how menacing your character is, I feel, much more effective than like, oh, we are standing in the remnants of a burning village, and I'm standing there looking menacing. Like, that's scary.
Yeah.
But that's not, like, emotionally scary,
no,
you know?
And I think you're touching on something very important, which is that your villain has to be a threat, whether it's physically, whatever. And I'll give a direct comparison here because I think it'll be easy for people. Vader, in Episode 4 in New Hope, whatever you want to call it, immediately feels like a threat. You are terrified. He is blowing up planets. Everybody's bowing to him. People are running away because he seems undefeatable head on. Now let's and he wins all of his fights in the first movie throughout that whole film. Doesn't lose. He kills Obi-Wan in front of Luke. Terrifying. Go to the newer Star Wars films. Kylo Ren, badass looking villain with a great actor, a good story, should be a super intimidating villain. He loses every single fight in that first film and pretty much across the trilogy. How are you ever supposed to be scared of him? You know, like the main character beats him first try, boom, easy. It's like, okay, that's not really an intimidating villain. Your villain needs to feel like a threat in general, but particularly to your main character.
No, for sure. And I think that with a number of these villains, they've been kind of like, no matter the size of the castle, kind of king of the castle villains, how would you deal with like a kind of lone wolf villain? Like a bit of what we're getting. I guess he's kind of king of the castle too, but with Ursa, like he is kind of a singular individual and he's surrounded by like scary other singular individuals.
I think I guess Urso is kind of pivoting out, but I love, and this is kind of like a trope, but it's the antithesis to the like personal connected villain, but it can very easily translate into the personal connected villain. And I'll give you a bunch of examples of it, which is basically your evil, often bounty hunter type figure who just wants to complete their job.
Yeah.
And the protagonist is standing in the way. Your Deathstrokes, like those types of characters. And then that obviously that turns into a very personal feud with Dick Grayson that becomes like something that people can talk about as like this super personal, direct thing. And it doesn't have to be, like a bounty hunter. I'm trying to think of like another person who's like trying to complete their goals. I guess Kingpin's kind of like top of his castle, but like Kingpin and Daredevil don't really have any reason to directly hate each other. But Daredevil just keeps fucking up Kingpin's plans to the point where it becomes so antithesis and so, direct that it is this personal feud. So I think having a villain who's like, I need to do X, or I want to accomplish X, whether it's he's paid to do X, you can go like Blacktop Bill in Nocterra. Like you have a villain who's supposed to do X, they want to do X, they want to take over this, they want to rob a bank, they want to do whatever. It can be the simplest thing. But your protagonist just is in the way. Sometimes unintentionally. Like, if you want to go to non-superheroes, fight, non-combat, non-action, like, there's often, something along the lines of like, they're trying to rig this competition, or they're trying to, stack the odds or get this person to win something. And then your main character, who's completely oblivious to this like evil corporation, just happens to keep winning or keep, progressing in this thing that they're not supposed to be progressing in. Like there's a very easy way to build up a conflict if you give your villain clear goals. Because I think a lot of people are big on giving their protagonists and their main characters and their, good guy characters goals and art. Like, but I think it's not just as important, but more important to give your villains goals.
And I that segues well into my next little bullet point on villains.
Intentional.
Totally intentional, fully telepathically connected.
Yeah.
Where do you think the line in the sand is for what makes like a reasonable, I'm gonna say, villain, and what makes like just an evil villain? And what do you think are the merits of the two sides of that line?
What do you mean by reasonable? Like are we going how evil they are, or are we going like what readers will accept to even like exist?
There's cartoon supervillain. There's the Joker, who is killing because he likes to kill, and that's like his thing.
Yeah.
Then there's
something to be very careful with because
very much so. Then there's Lex Luthor, who does bad things, but they're because he genuinely believes that superheroes are dangerous and you need a way to kind of lock them down, and then also like corporate greed or whatever.
Yeah.
So like where do you think you can get from a villain who has like goals essentially, and a villain who's just evil?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it touches on that thing I was talking about earlier, where like your reader really only cares about what they care about, which means your villain can murder puppies on the weekends and just serial kill thousands of people. If none of them are important or like touched on in the story, they're not really going to seem that cartoonishly evil or like that like much to that side, because your reader doesn't really care unless they're like directly experiencing it. So it's like what makes Joker come across as like this unforgivably is when he does things like paralyze Barbara Gordon, kill Jason Todd. Like it's when it affects the characters that we care about.
Yeah.
And then you talk about Lex Luthor, and the reason that despite his like, I guess less evil sense, like he comes across as just as much of an arch enemy to Superman, because he's just constantly trying to fuck over Superman. And in that sense, he's no different in a reader's mind to Joker, because they're both trying to constantly fuck over the hero. And it doesn't matter that the Joker will kill, children on weekends for fun, and Lex Luthor would think that's disgusting and despicable. It doesn't matter, because we look at them in the way that they parallel our hero. So I think where the line is, at least in terms of like getting your readers to accept stuff, is to make sure that your villain is involved with your character. Like if you have a villain, you want to build them up basically, and this is something I'll say in like parallel storytelling with your main character, and they're not going to meet for a long time. That's tricky because that villain can do a lot of things. People aren't really going to care. And I'll give you an example that weirdly proves the point, but it's good because they knew it and they did it intentionally, which is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Zuko going around being a villain, but because he's not directly interacting with Aang for a lot of it, we don't care, and thus he can be redeemed because, and this is the, like, you talk about Iroh and Zuko, people are like, why are they redeemable and Azula isn't? Here's your reason. It's not because they're such good, better people, or Azula has done such worse and more irredeemable things to them. It's because the things we care about as readers, they are good people and she's a bad person. That's not killing innocents, burning villages. They all do that. But Zuko and Iroh, they care about their family. They won't betray each other. You know, they have, you know, their code. And yeah, they can burn down a village, but, you know, they're not going to turn on their family. It's like, as a reader, we're more okay with that. Azula, yeah, she's also going to burn down a village, but she will turn on Zuko. She will kill Iroh. She doesn't care about that. And that, as a reader, is going to be more redeemable. So that's another thing, like, that little scene of, like, a villain screaming at their assistant, who's, like, the super loyal assistant, is actually going to do more than them killing an innocent person. Because, as a reader, it just comes across as worse, for whatever reason. Because I think we're desensitized to, like, nameless person dying, you know?
For sure. No, yeah, I think that's very, very astute. And looking at the merits of the two types that we have there, the kind of irredeemable madman, essentially, and the kind of, I think that it does kind of split into those. I think that it's very hard to have a redeemable villain who is on that kind of inherently evil side.
Harley Quinn.
And not every villain who is, you know, who'd you say?
Harley Quinn.
I mean, barring rewriting the entire character.
True. Round of applause.
Barring doing something like that, you're evil person is always going to be evil, but that doesn't mean that your like motivated villain has to be sympathetic. Like, no. I think there's been a tendency to try to soften villains.
Yes.
And, well, I think that
especially comics, is you want to give them their own, you know, miniseries, whatever, and you want you to follow the character. And if you're going to follow the character, they have to be at least somewhat sympathetic.
Yeah. And I think that it's very much been a thing of trying to soften these characters. And, like, I'm much more partial to a motivated villain, even if it's not, like, a sympathetic villain. Like, I don't think the Joker is particularly interesting. He's pulling deadly pranks. Cool. But, you know, it just... There is that line, and I think that bringing up Avatar is very good for looking at, if you want to redeem a villain, it has to be your intention from the start. Because, like you said, you need all of these, like, degrees of separation and these these little crumbs of groundwork.
I think you were talking about laying the groundwork, right? That's
I was,
where you're going.
in fact, looking for the words groundwork. Thank you. Look at this man with his degrees. Amazing. Yeah, so I think that makes for, you know, a villain who you can then turn into a hero. It's very hard to go the other way around.
What, turning a hero into a villain?
No, turning like I guess
like
not the other way around.
Into
deciding to turn a villain into a sympathetic hero.
That's just all of DC. That's just DC. Yeah. Always.
It sure is.
Yeah. Yep.
Our beloved boys. But that's fine. Everything's fine. Villains. I thought I had one more bullet point for villains to hit on.
Have you
Do
lost
you
it?
have any bullet points for villains?
I guess because we're talking about creating a villain here.
Yes.
I'm gonna pivot a little bit because
Sure.
I think we've talked about like their place in the story a lot and like their characterization. But how, I guess, do you build up in your mind like that intimidation, that iconic look, that like how do you go about literally crafting a villain in terms of design, in terms of, you know, power? It doesn't have to be literal power or social power or whatever makes them, because having a villain who has no power is very difficult. So yeah,
I think that I'm gonna pull back something that you referenced and that we've been talking about all episode because of Edenwood. Blacktop fucking Bill. That man
Bill's a great villain.
He's introduced so phenomenally because we first get like these little rumors of him. We get people's accounts of him. We get the like, oh, that's just a legend or whatever. And then when we meet Bill, we meet him at what's the name of the first town? It's where they built the where they made the light bulb. But in that first town, at that they call them the harbors, the ports, whatever it is. The ports. We meet him there, where we have Bellwether, who we already love. We have a bunch of characters who we've seen be like sympathetic to Val and very nice, and they immediately like lock in on that sense of community. And Bill just disrupts that shit so hard, and he like kills someone's face off. Burns someone's face off, and it's mysterious, which I think is so important. I think that a really big thing about your villains is that you should not have them like go full force immediately. Like you should get little crumbs of what they're capable of, so that they can have these scary like full power moments later on in the story.
Full agree.
Because you don't need to see something to be, you know, nervous about it. Like the unknown of what this person's potential is almost certainly going to be scarier than knowing that he's got like
it's like in comics you can't do the like full writing thing of their imagination's scarier than whatever you have, so like just don't really describe it. Like they're gonna see the person in comics. But you can absolutely do what you said, and like you still use the philosophy but through their abilities of like don't show what they're fully capable of, and their imagination will be scarier. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's a great way to deal with villain power.
What do you think is a good way to build kind of fear for your villain?
Firstly, I touched on it earlier, they can't lose early on. And like that's big, because a lot of people are going to introduce them with kind of an immediate fight, which is a real tough situation. So if you're going to do a fight early on, and obviously this is talking about action, but it can be an interaction so if it's not action, it's much easier to have your villain win the first thing, because you know they're not going to kill them. You know, it's like if it's just an interaction in like, you know, school or whatever, and they're using their power, like they can bully the kid and send them home crying or whatever. Like that's an easy thing to do. In an action story, especially in one where like death's on the table, it's much harder to have your villain win an initial fight. But if you can find an interesting way to do that, great. Otherwise, keep them apart. You can do lackeys. You can do, you know, we have an entire Star Wars film where Luke and Vader don't fight. There's your blueprint. You know, keep them apart, or have your villain win and separate them. Like, however you figure that out. There's, you know, numerous examples of a hero getting their ass kicked, but like barely escaping because of circumstances or because of something happening. And that works. But yeah, you can't like immediately show your reader that they are beatable, because you don't want your reader to think they are beatable, especially early on. And just but here's the last note I'll give them is you do have to give them a taste, which is if you're introducing your villain, it's like, they are important, they are powerful, they are deadly, but we don't see them do anything. That's gonna land a little lame. Do your Blacktop Bill burning somebody's face off. Do something to show their
Vader
power.
Force choking the admiral.
Do something that
Regina George Bullying a girl until she cries.
But yeah, like I think that's where I'm gonna land on it. I think
All right,
that's
I
my
have
vote.
one final question for you. I know we're
Okay,
running a
I'm here
little
for it.
long, but we
No, that's
love chit
fine.
chatting.
Yeah, we love stuff.
The final like form of villain that I would love your take on it, both in
Yes.
terms of doing or not doing, as may be the case. How do you feel about twist villains? Like they were your ally for the most of the thing, and then plot twist, they are either the villain or even just like working for the villain. But I feel like the villain is
Yeah.
probably the more.
Sadly, overly poorly done, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. Because here's the most common formula is we have a villain already, and that villain is a mystery, and there's really only one person who can obviously be that villain. So, or maybe they have one decoy, and you're gonna be like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not gonna be the decoy. So that is overdone. Don't do your masked villain who's gonna be revealed to be somebody, and there's only one option. If you're gonna do the mask and the reveal, it's hard to pull off well, because people are just kind of very turned on to that stuff now, so they're gonna suspect
Yeah.
that it's the person who they should least expect or whatever. So the best way to do it is to kind of either have no like direct villain or have a different villain or a secondary villain, and then like essentially do a villain reveal where we didn't know that there was going to be a villain reveal. If that,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'm explaining it well, but when
I
you
think I
don't
kind of.
know that there is a villain to be revealed,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, okay,
Yes. Yeah.
they're fighting against I don't know, this corporation or whatever, or they're trying to stop, you know maybe it's simple. They're trying to stop like gang crime or whatever, so
Mm-hmm.
it feels like the villain's more of like the city as a whole or whatever, and then all of a sudden you find out that like their mentor is a gang lord, but we didn't know that there was a big gang lord that was like conspiring against them, so like
Mm-hmm.
can come a little bit better there. I don't think it's great in general. I think there's great uses of it, and I think like everything you can use it very well, but I think you really have to think it out. And I think more often than not, it's going to be something that's kind of found along the way, or it's kind of there
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning, more so than like, I want to have a twist villain, let me write a twist villain. I
And
don't
see,
think
that
that usually ends
was
as well.
you actually touched on something that I think can be a really cool way to do this, which
Yeah.
is where it's not that the readers get the reveal of it. It's if the readers know all along that this person is a villain. I think that that adds an element of intrigue because I think that there's still very much the if you've written your characters well and if you have like a good story, your main character learning that one of their greatest friends has betrayed them is gonna land, even if it's not when the reader learns about
Yeah.
this. And I think that that especially works well in like kind of it can work really well if they're like an ally of the villain, even if they're not the main villain. Like if you think of like
Yeah.
Tara, like we know that Tara is working for Slade, so it sucks as you watch Beast Boy like get really close to her or whatever.
Yeah.
Specifically for some reason referencing the cartoon, I was coming to mind because she does a lot of like communication with him uh, in the
Yeah. I
cartoon.
was trying to remember when it was revealed in the cartoon as you were saying that, because I figured you were going else the cartoon. Because I
Yeah.
was like, did we know in the comic? Because I don't think we know in the
I don't
comic
think so either. It's been so long since I've read the Judas
ahead of
Contract, even though
time.
I've got it literally right there.
Or well, I
Um,
mean, or at least it's that we find out like within the same issue. Maybe it
yeah,
is earlier than they do in the issue, but it's close enough that it doesn't feel like. I think in the show you find out like at episodes before or whatever. So
yeah. And I
yeah,
think that it can work if it's like your actual villain as well, especially if they're not supposed to be like a close friend. If it's just like this person they think is an ally is not. And you
yeah,
can, I think that that helps you to get away with making the main character oblivious without it feeling cheap. Like the last thing that I
yeah.
think, the kind of
I
worst
think that's one of the
thing
things that we
is when it
often
comes
disagree.
out of nowhere.
Yeah.
So if you've
Yes, I
written
agree.
them as best friends this entire time, and
Yeah,
then it's, Prince Hans from Frozen style, if only somebody loved you, uh,
yeah,
it's like, okay, that came out of nowhere. It feels a little undeserved, I guess.
yeah.
Uh, So it can help avoid that
Yeah.
because they can be incredibly convincing without it feeling like you're just lying.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that I think we often talk about that we just both kind of are on very different sides of. I am never really a big fan of like the reveal to the audience before you reveal to the character, because I think it cheapens it a lot of time. I'm going to give an example here that I don't think you've seen, but a lot of people at home will have probably seen.
Oh god, is it a Star Wars thing?
No, it's from The Flash, but early Flash when everybody was watching The Flash. So hopefully that'll be good enough for people. Which is in season 2, the big thing is Zoom is the main villain, and the reveal is that he's not the real Jay Garrick, but the guy who we were led to believe is Jay Garrick throughout the season. And there's 2 reveals of this, one to the audience, and then several episodes later to the characters. And I've always felt that is incredibly lame because it's so much cooler if you figure it out with the characters, because the scene of the characters figuring it out is so phenomenally done. And I think it was actually a pretty good twist, because one of the things you can play with when you're adapting stuff like that is nobody's going to think it's Jay Garrick, because we all, comic book nerds go, well, Jay Garrick is, a good guy, so it can't be Jay Garrick who's actually the villain. But by revealing it early to the reader, like, yeah, we get these cool scenes where you have that tension of like, oh man, Barry's working with the villain, and oh, that's terrifying, and like, yeah, but I don't think it's worth the sacrifice of the reveal, because the reveal comes off much worse, because the characters will be like, oh my god, I can't believe this, and it's like, this is really cool, but I know, and oh, that's a little rough. But yeah, so I don't fully disagree with you. There's good things that can come from it, but I do think if you have the recipe for a good reveal, that you're cheapening it by, your reader already knowing. So
for sure. I
I
definitely get what you're saying with that. I just think the worst thing you can possibly do is have no groundwork and then do a reveal.
Oh yes, completely agree with that. Your Frozen example was perfect. I hate Frozen, by the way, if that has never been talked about on this. My middle school decided for whatever reason that every time we had free time or like end of the year, like everybody would just play Frozen. So I probably saw Frozen like 9 times in 1 year, and now Frozen makes me want to gouge my eyes out.
I support this for you. I have feelings about Frozen and the character arcs therein, but don't need to share them here, because they're also, I guess they're not particularly positive. I think that there's a lot of kind of missed opportunities with that movie.
Gotcha.
But it's it does have like 3 bangers.
Because of just, life circumstances, and I don't actively hate most, entertainment, because I'm like, I can just not engage with it. But
that's fair. That's how I feel about the movie Elf with Will Ferrell.
I have
Elf.
A weird story about Elf, where like I had like some sort of like fever dream about like let me look at something. Oh, really? Right. So Elf came out in 2003. So I was only born for like 1 year at that point. So yeah, Elf came out well before I was old enough to have. But I had this whole thing where like I was, and maybe somebody was just pranking me, but I had a conversation with an adult where they were like gaslighting me into thinking Elf came out like a month before our conversation, and I was like, no, I saw Elf years ago, and they were like, this movie's brand new, it's still in theaters, what are you talking about? And so my child self had like a panic attack.
Is that the end of the story?
Yeah. That's my Elf story.
This man has 2 degrees in storytelling. In any case, that is going to take us to a close on the Creator Corner for this week. Jayward, what are we going to be pulling for next week's episode?
We have Green Arrow, number 12. We have Drawing Blood, number 2. We have The Six Fingers, number 4. Ultimate Spider-Man, number 5. And a new number 1, William of Newbury.
That's right. And if you missed it this past Saturday, we dropped a bonus episode where we continue in our traipse across the Massive-verse with Inferno Girl Red.
Yes.
I'm not gonna lie, it was a little more negative than many of our previous reviews have been. Uh, but I think we had valid feelings, and you should check it
Yeah, and
out to hear those
there were still things
feelings.
that we liked about it, which we talked about. We
Yeah,
talked about
yeah.
the Massiverse as a whole, which was, I think, a little bit more positive and where we're going with that, and some of the stuff that we're really excited about coming up in the Massiverse. But as always, we try to give you guys our most genuine and honest thoughts on comics, and unfortunately, those aren't always positive. But
Edenwood.
yeah,
I'm sorry, that
if
was
you
definitely a cough.
if you would rather avoid something a little bit more negative, there's your heads up, and you can jump
Or
in
if
at the
you're a
next
messy
chapter of the
bitch and
Massiverse.
want something more negative.
Yeah, you can jump there. So, just there's your heads up. But
yeah.
If that's not your speed, or if it is and you're still going to be joining us for the main episode, it is, of course, coming next Wednesday. Hopefully, we'll see you all next week. Comic Geeks.
I can't believe that in the 2 weeks where we haven't done back issue reviews, we've done 2-hour episodes.
Yeah.